learning.
Okay, we're recording,
okay.
Rav.
Okay, 100%. I'm just shifting a few lines backward that we did last week. It's basically going to be from where it says, it's right at the end of 53a of Nun Gimel Amud Aleph, for those of you that are following in a Gemara. And it was over there where it says, there was a passage of Brisa which said, it gave a few different instances of what could occur to the Avodah Zarah that belonged to the Goy, and based on that, whether it's a show of rejection. Remember, we said the general idea was that if he shows a rejection attitude, then he's revoking the status of the Avodah Zarah, and he doesn't respect it anymore. And the passage gave a few different examples. If you can see where I'm reading where it says, Tanu Rabbanon. Let's just get the red marker again so we can just show everybody where we are. Yeah, Tanu Rabbanon. That's fine, I'll have afterwards. Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught. He gave a few examples. Lava Aleha. So I've just backtracked a few lines so it will look familiar for those that were here last week. But I'm going to move quickly through the ones that we already did so that we can catch some traction, some ground. Lava Aleha, if he borrowed against the Avodah Zarah, so in other words, he gave it as collateral. He didn't actually sell it. You pawned it, as they'd say, or it was in a place where there was a landfall, a rockfall or a landfall, a place where some loose sand or gravel or whatever, a little bit of like a mini natural disaster came down and covered over his statue, his Avodah Zarah. Robbers stole it. So various things which affect his ownership of it. Some of them he might have done himself, but these refer to things that he actually didn't do, except for the borrowing that he did himself. But when the landfall that fell over it, or the fact that it was stolen, he didn't do it himself. Or the owners so-called abandoned it, and they went overseas. In all these cases where the non-Jews ran away from the Avodah Zarah, so we learned that is as if the attitude is to reject it, and therefore it loses its status as Avodah Zarah. But then this passage made a very interesting statement. If you remember, it said, Ima sidin lachzer, if in the future the Goyim plan to return and reinstate the service of the Avodah Zarah. In other words, if they don't give up hope and they're coming back. And the example that the Gemara used is Kamilchemes Yehoshua, like in the wars of Yehoshua, leader of the Jewish people, who in the wars of the conquests against Canaan, so he chased out nations. We conquered nations that were there. And if those nations had an intention to return, they said, right now we have to run for our lives, but maybe we'll be able to come back and rededicate or reserve our Avodah Zarah, then Eina B'Teila, then it is not bottled, it's not nullified. And if you remember, the Gemara unpacked this passage, and it gave reasons why all four case scenarios were necessary. Utzricha, we needed all of them to itana lava alea. Let's say that the only example of abandonment or rejection that it used was the fact that the guy goes and gives it up as collateral. We would say that maybe the only reason that it's still considered Avodah Zarah is because he didn't actually sell it. Midalah Zabna, he didn't sell it. Lo Batla, therefore it's not nullified. You know, if he sold it, it means he doesn't plan to give it back. But if you give something as collateral, as a pledge, you hope to pay back the debts and get back what belongs to you. So in other words, he expressed as an intention is that he still wants it. If he didn't want it, he would have sold it. The fact that he gives it, that he pawns it, is because he hopes to bring back the money and get back his goods. But you would think that in the case where a landfall fell over it and covered it, maybe that's not considered a situation where he'd give up. Maybe he'd hope that he could still uncover it, but perhaps he didn't uncover it. So you would think that because he didn't take out his shovel and his spade, he didn't bring some earth moving equipment, as we'd call it, to move the earth away and recover or reveal whatever it was that belonged to him that got lost or covered. So we would think that therefore it's bottled. In other words, the attitude is that he didn't try to dig for it. So that's why the Brisa wants us to know. The fact is, in his mind, maybe he could come back and get it. So tzricha, so we need this case too. And if we learnt only the case that a rockfall fell over it, we would think Mishum de Savar, because he believes Hamancha, it's safe. Nobody's going to come and uncover. I've got bad news and good news here. The bad news is that I experienced a bit of a chaos, that some land came over my idol and my idolatrous statue. But the good news is that nobody knows where it is. It's buried. Sometimes when you want to put away something and you stick it underground and nobody knows that it's there. Hamancha, it's safely there. Whenever I need it, I'll come and I'll fetch it. But if robbers take it away, who says I'm going to find them? You don't always find the robbers and where they've taken it to. We might think that his attitude is he didn't go and hire a private investigator. He didn't say that I have a wonderful, gorgeous idol and I'd like to spend some money getting it back. So if you're a good private investigator, please go and look for it for me. So we think that shows an attitude of rejection, that he doesn't spend any money or effort going looking for it. You see that with, God forbid, with burglaries and robberies. If a person loses something that just has a monetary value, so as long as the insurance are happy to pay out, so you know what? It's a sideways move. I lost it, I've got it. But if it's a matter of sentimental preciousness, doesn't help to get another one. That's not the one from my grandmother and my great-grandmother. And so then the person makes a much better effort to try and recover exactly that thing that they lost. So we would think that the fact that listing that robber stole it and he doesn't go, trying to track it down, putting in effort, hanging up rewards. So maybe that means that he doesn't care about it. He's nullified it. Therefore, we need that case as well. All the cases are necessary. And lastly, if the passage, the Brisa only used the example of robber stealing it, we'd say Mishum de Sover, because he starts to calculate. Now, hold on a second. He starts to do, what do they call it? A bit of a study on criminology. Where does it go? Like if you really want to figure out how to solve crime, you've got to figure out why they're stealing it. If guys are hijacking a car every week, that doesn't mean they're hijacking the car for personal use. They don't need a new car every week. They're obviously selling it or looking for parts. So if it was stolen by robbers, he starts to think about it. Now he starts to say to himself, this was my Avodah Zarah, this was my deity. Either way, if a non-Jew is the one that got it from the robbers, that's who they sold it to when they went to the marketplace to try and realize some cash. They found a Gentile like me. He would daven to it. He'd pray to it. So therefore, Yisrael Shaklev, if it was a Jew, in those days, most of the Jews didn't serve Avodah Zarah. They were good boys. But anyways, the Jew's going to say, you know what? This thing is worth something. He'll do, Google's got that thing where you can identify an object. Or he takes it to an antique expert and he says, hold on a second. By the God, this is worth something. Let me find someone to buy it. So the non-Jew says, whoever it is that he takes it to, it's going to be a Gentile who's going to respect it and serve it. He's going to serve it just like I did. The non-Jew, if it's he himself who buys it, he will serve it as if it's his idolatry. And if it's a Jew, the Jew will sell it to a non-Jew.
But a Jew
so
can't get benefit out of it.
Sorry?
Can't get a lot out of it.
So he wouldn't know that. He may not know that. This is the non-Jew making a calculation about what's going to happen with his idol. This is not whether the Jew can use it or not. He's making a calculation. What do you think happened to my idol after the Ganovim stole it? Or maybe it will be an unscrupulous guy who doesn't care as long as he can fetch a price, or an ignorant guy that doesn't know that he's not allowed to benefit. But if you talk about idols that were abandoned, you're talking about people who packed their bags. They themselves left. You're talking about a family that put in papers. They said, we're immigrating. And all the important stuff was packed. They said to the packers, put in the fridge. and put in the freezer and definitely put in the whiskey and in the golf clubs. But the idol, we'll get another one overseas. We don't need to drag that old idol overseas. They abandoned it. What does abandonment mean? Rejection. That means that its status is revoked. But Batlua, they would have definitely abandoned it. Tzricha, therefore, it's necessary. In other words, the Gemara goes through all of these cases and says, whatever the case is, whether it was stolen by robbers, whether there was a natural disaster that fell down over where your statue was, or whether it was taken off to a shop to get a loan and used as collateral. In all these cases, the one thing we're looking for is what is the intention of the Gentiles that abandoned it? Is it a temporary abandonment? Is the plan to come back? We're going to come back and fetch it from wherever we pawned it. We're going to come back and fetch it from wherever it's lying in the ground. If robbers went and stole it, we're going to track them down. We're going to at least get a private investigator to do the best job of finding my idol that I had. Even if I have to put a booty or what do they call it, a bounty price on it, I'm going to get it back. If the intention is to return, then it's a problem. It's not revoked. And if the intention is not to return, then it is revoked. But what's interesting, this is actually where we got up to, is the expression of the Gemara is, on this brisa, is K'milchemes Yehoshua. It compares it to the way it was with the Goyim in the war of Yehoshua. When the Jewish people crossed into the land of Canaan, and when we came over there, we had to conquer the nations that were already there, and some of them ran away from whatever was theirs. What was their intention vis-a-vis their Avodah Zarah? Did they say, this is a temporary problem, it's a military struggle, I've got to run? But then they came back, like in World War II. A lot of people ran away from where they were. There was a lot of displacement. And we don't get into all the politics, but in most real wars, people get displaced. It's sad, but that's what happens. So if the intention is to come back, then the intention is not to reject the Avodah Zarah. It's like with the war of Yehoshua, and there is no nullification. So it's interesting that it would seem that according to the authors of the Brisa, the Gentiles that were, how would you call it, that ran as a result of that original war of Joshua that was led by Joshua, by Yehoshua, their intention was to come back. Whether they came back, whether they didn't come back, the intention was to come back. And the Gemara is going to unpack this issue. What does it mean? Their intention was to come back. And the Gemara says, Milsagav urcha komash melon. The reason that it, the Gemara asks, why connect all of these situations with some arbitrary historical occurrence? We're talking about something that can happen at any time. And we're saying that generally speaking, if there is any kind of disaster that causes Gentiles to run away from their Avodah Zarah, from their deity, we have to calculate whether the status of the deity is revoked or not based on the intention to return. But why does this passage have a hang-up with a particular point in history when Yehoshua came and conquered the 7 nations of Canaan? What is the connection between that piece of history? So Milsa Agav Urcha Koma Ashmelon. The Brisa was coming to teach us an additional lesson together with everything else that we're being taught. And what was the lesson? It wants to give us an additional idea, Ki had the Omer Rav Yehuda Omer Rav, which is based on the statement of Rabbi Yehuda Omer Rav, where he said, Yisrael shezakaf leveina leyishtachav islah. We actually had this passage quoted once before, that if a Jew erected a stone, he took a brick, a tall brick, and he decided to put it up vertical in order to make it like a little pillar. And he said, now this can be served. You know, in those days, there were people who, the moment you made a monument, they thought this could be a bit spiritual. It has some divine power or force. It's an idol, and let's worship it. So if a Jew did that, Uva Goy, and a Goy came along, and he bowed to it, Asara, he now turns it into Avodah Zarah, and it becomes prohibited. The question over here is, the question that arises, is one of the things we've been saying, one of the rules is that in order to make something Avodah Zarah, it has to belong to you. Generally speaking, you can't take somebody else's thing and turn it into Avodah Zarah. You know, you can't arrive and start serving someone else's property that belongs to them and turn it into Avodah Zarah. So how does it work, this concept, that if a Jew takes a brick or a little boulder or pillar and sets it up in a particular kind of way, his intention might have been that it should be ornamental, but then a Gentile comes along and turns it into a deity, bows down and prays to it, it doesn't belong to the Gentile. So how does he make it into Avodah Zarah if it really belongs to me or you? Manol da Asara, how do we know that he could make it prohibited? So Amar Rabbi Elazar said, Katechila shel Eretz Yisrael. You learn this from the beginning of the history of the land of Israel. How do we know this? The Alma Rachamana, because the Torah says, when you will come into the land of Canaan, you will see people that serve Asherah trees. And your instruction as the Jewish people, Va'asherayim tisrafun ba'aish. You will burn the Asherah trees with fire. The Asherah trees are Avodah Zarah. They made them and they turned them into Avodah Zarah. You can't keep them. You can't say, you know what, I'll keep it for shade. I'll use it for a picnic spot. They used it as an Asherah. You got to get rid of it. Now, hold on a second. The question here is, who did it belong to? It actually belonged to us. You know why? Because we're actually reading it in the current parashas. Lech lecha vayera. Hashem says to our forefather Abraham, to Avraham Avinu, that I'm giving you this land. Hashem gave Avraham Avinu the land. In fact, although we only arrived there much later, according to Torah, the land was given to Avraham already then. The title deed was handed by God to Abraham at that time. If that's the case, who did the Asherah trees belong to? Us. If the Asherah trees belong to us, doesn't make a difference that they were serving them. Should be no problem. How could they make them into Avodah Zarah if it didn't belong to them, belong to us? So, Michte, let's see, says the Gemara. Yerusha Hilohem Avisayim. This was an inheritance that the Jewish people had from their forefathers. God had given it to Abraham. The rule is that a person cannot prohibit something that's not his. So how were those nations able to take Asherah trees while they were living there, which technically belonged to Am Yisrael, to us, to the Jewish people, and turn them into Avodah Zarah? So the Gemara says you could suggest that maybe there were trees, very old trees. Maybe we're talking about trees that were around before Hashem gave the land to Avraham Avinu. So if there were trees that were around before Hashem gave the land to Avraham Avinu, and at that point they were already designated as Asherah trees, then those trees could effectively have become Avodah Zarah because it was theirs. So they could make it Avodah Zarah. But you could answer that. Hold on a second. If the trees that were theirs could become Avodah Zarah, those ones they could revoke. You can't revoke Avodah Zarah when it belongs to a Jew, but the Gentiles can revoke Avodah Zarah that belongs to them. So the answer would then be that when we came into those places, we could have said to them, before you go away, revoke the Avodah Zarah of the trees that you left behind. If you know what's good for you, keep running away from your Avodah Zarah or do some gesture. If you're talking about the trees that predated or preceded the land being given to Abraham, to Avraham Avinu, any kind of nullification would have worked. They could have been revoked. So we're back to our original question. What is this reason that the Torah said, you have to destroy their Asherah trees with fire? Either way, if it was trees, he's going to come to that. That's a good point. But in the meantime, we're saying either way, if the trees belong to the Jewish people, they can't make it Avodah Zarah. If it belonged to them, they can revoke it. So why should it be burnt? You've got a solution either way.
They're going to revoke it.
Elo. So he explains the way this halacha works. Interesting halacha. The Gemara says, plachu Yisrael la'egel. From the time that the Jewish people served the golden calf in the wilderness, we had a bit of a blip, a bump in our relationship with God, and we served the golden calf. And when we served the golden calf, so we were Megala, we showed, sadly so, but we showed that we too sometimes will serve Avodah Zarah. Before we served the golden calf, one could assume that maybe the Jewish people are immune. They've seen big miracles. That's a whole discussion in its own. They've seen the sea split. They've seen the Torah being given. The Jewish people are immune from serving Avodah Zarah and rebelling against God. But unfortunately, as a result of the incident of the Egel, Galu Adaitayu the Nichaluhu Avodah Zarah, we revealed that we can also get stuck sometimes in the wrong stuff in Avodah Zarah. And therefore, if we can do Avodah Zarah, if Jews can get involved in Avodah Zarah, the Asu Goyim, and when non-Jews come and do it together with us, Shlichusa Didhu Avda. They are our agents. They're doing it together with us and for us. Hachanami here too. Yisrael Shizak Aflavena. If a Jew erected a brick and intended it as perhaps this is going to be something to serve, Gal Yadata the Nichalei Avodah Zarah. He basically has acknowledged that he doesn't mind if this gets used for Avodah Zarah. He sets up the situation. And when the guy comes and davens to it and prays to it, the day Ka'avad is doing his shluchus. Basically, the Gemara introduces a very novel idea. The idea is that the rule that we say that you can't make someone else's property Avodah Zarah is without permission. But if you're acting as an agent, in other words, if sadly a Jew and a Gentile collaborate together to do something against God, to create an idol, and they collaborate together to do it, then it does work. It works in a negative way. The Jew can create the idol and own it, and the non-Jew can be his agent to turn it into Avodah Zarah. And because of the fact that we as a nation, at the time of the Egel, opened up that can of worms, we basically said that we're not immune. We can do Avodah Zarah, or we can desire Avodah Zarah. We created a whole new idea that we could create the space or own the Avodah Zarah, and the non-Jew comes in and becomes the agent. So the Gemara asks a question, hold on a second. The Egel, the calf, was a very specific kind of Avodah Zarah. Why are you extrapolating to anything? And in fact, we can discuss it. It's not right here in the Gemara. There's very, very mystical reasons as to what happened with the golden calf, why it was a calf, and what was their thinking. That's the whole story of its own. But, you know, in Avodah Zarah, there's different types. It's not just one type. In the negative forces of spirituality, there are very, very different types of Avodah Zarah. There are different types of klippa. The Gemara says maybe the Jewish Avodah Zarah problem, the Jewish Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah was an Egel Yetzer Hara. Calves they make, golden calves. But Midachrin Allah, they wouldn't get involved in stones and bricks and pillars and statues. Maybe we already knew from our forefather Abraham in Terach's days. We already had a tradition. Stones, rocks, those don't work, don't help. So the Gemara says, no, Amar Kroif. If you look at the pasuk, when the Jewish people were dancing by the golden calf, one of the things they said, Eile Elohecha Yisrael, these are your gods, Israel. They made a new motto, a new chant. They said, Eile Elohecha Yisrael, these are your gods. Gods in plural. In other words, they were saying, not just this golden calf, anything that we can use in the world, God forbid, as a way to rebel against Hashem and make what's called Elohim Acherim, other opposition forces to God. Melamed, what does that teaches us? She'ivu, that they desired le'eloyes harbe, many different types of gods. It wasn't only a matter of a specific type of Avodah Zarah called golden calves. The Jews, unfortunately, at the time, developed a passion for all kinds of junk. You find often that when people get into the garbage, they get a whole selection of garbage that they get into. It's usually not one passion, but many different types of nonsense. So when we got, how would you call it, verblunget, I don't know, maybe the Yiddish word, with the golden calf, at the same time, we were running into trouble with many different various troubles. Hence, we were singing, Eile Elohecha, these are your gods. Not the golden calf was one god, it was one calf, but we were singing these were their gods. If that's the case, at that point, we already had an appetite for other stuff like Asherah trees. So we could become partners. If we had an appetite for Asherah trees, and we own trees that were in Canaan because God had given them to Abraham. And in Canaan at that time, there were Gentiles who were making a religion and serving those trees. Then our unfortunate need for that kind of avodah zarah and their service could combine and create a problem that they became like our agents. They say, Zachin la'adam shaloi b'fanav, you can act as a person's agent for what he so-called merits. So they are there in the land, worshiping trees that belong to us. Doesn't matter that it's our trees and their worship. It comes together in agency. So the Gemara says, but hold on a second. If that's the case, we should have to draw a distinction. You know why? Because after the Jews worshipped the golden calf, what happened? The golden calf, what happened? Moshe intervened. And he broke the luchos, and there was sadness, and there was Yom Kippur, and there was kapara, there was atonement. And Hashem said, Solachti kidvarecha. And we cried and we davened, and some of the naughty people got punished or passed away. What happened in the end? We again came into a pure space. Nobody was serving avodah zarah anymore. We came out of the trouble. We rehabilitated, according to what we say in Yom Kippur, and everything that Moshe says over there. Hashem said, I have forgiven according to your request, Moses. So we were forgiven. If that's the case, that we were forgiven, our desire for avodah zarah switched off, like on the electric cord, boom, the Jewish desire for avodah zarah was turned off. If it was turned off, then nothing that we own could become avodah zarah just because other people serve it. So therefore, says the Gemara, what we should say is at the time, get your calendar out and figure it out. At the time that the Jewish people were busy with the Egel, if there were Gentiles in Canaan busy with Asherah trees, those trees could be a problem. But from the day that the Jewish people were forgiven, from the moment that we're not serving avodah zarah anymore, then those trees belong to us, and those guys can't make them avodah zarah. So there should be, you call it a window of possibility for Asherah trees in Eretz Yisrael to become avodah zarah. Then the window closes. The Jews did tshuva, and nobody else can affect trees that belong to us. So called the Bahada Egel, those that were at the same time of the Egel, Ema called the Bahada Egel, shall we say that anything that was at the same time as the Egel, Natasru became forbidden. From then onwards, Nishtara, it should be allowed. To that, the Gemara says, Melvin, very similar to what you were asking before, Man Mochiach, who would be able to determine, who is going to be able to figure out which tree possibly became infected at the time that the Jewish people were misbehaving in the wilderness, and which tree not. We didn't have anybody in Canaan walking around saying, hold on a second, I've just WhatsApped the wilderness, and over there in the wilderness, they're busy with a golden calf, so we're in a danger zone. Anybody that serves Asherah trees, they're going to be a problem. But now they've done tshuva, Moshe's beseeched on their behalf, Hashem's forgiven, the possibility of avodah zarah has now switched off. We can't tell the difference. So we have to assume, says the Gemara, that at the end of the day, the Asherah trees that were served by the Goyim, the Gentile nations in Canaan, were our agents in their avodah zarah. They were making avodah zarah with stuff that belonged to us. But because of our short window of serving avodah zarah in the wilderness, we caused that avodah zarah took proper effect on those trees. Hence the rule that va'ashereim tishrafun ba'esh, we had to get rid of them. We couldn't use them, we couldn't benefit, we had to get rid of them. That's by the Mishnah. So we'll stop over there. We can say a word.
Maybe it wasn't just Charlotte.
Yeah.
If you give someone a gift,
Yeah.
right? So say you give someone a house, right? They've won this house. Excellent. But if you're going to give them that house, problems like walls that fall down, floors that are not properly put in. What did she give Israel? They gave us a place full of all this avodah zarah, 7 nations, the worst that existed at the time. Why were they there? Why didn't he like let them settle like in Russia and in New Zealand and in China and have their place empty? You come here, Abraham, here's your place. Come here, you don't have to worry about any avodah zarah. Not to worry about.
You can ask that question about the
Just-
whole world, but you can ask the same question about the whole world, because why does Hashem allow imperfection to give us the opportunity
No, but
to
it's
fix
give a
it?
gift. Give a gift. Yeah, give a gift.
But it's not.
Everybody's
It's not a
like-
gift. It's not a
Well,
gift
that
in the sense.
So last
Yeah, yeah,
that they didn't reach the level of the field.
yeah.
Therefore, they still own the land
Mm.
until such a time that
That they deserve
up
to be
the-
dispossessed.
the
Yeah.
the quantity.
Eloi Sholem
then
Avono
they
Emeli Adat.
deserve to get punished. So that is the plan of Hashem. It's part of the plan.
So
No, but
we don't-
Michael's asking more than that.
No,
Michael's asking why it's not cleaner when we
Well,
come in.
give someone a gift. You don't give them a gift that's like second hand or eighth hand. You give something that's like new, nice, clean, in a ribbon, finished. Okay, he's giving them a gift, but he's saying, you know what? To get the gift, you have to kill all these people. Then you have to get rid of all the Asherah trees, get rid of all the Avodah Zarah, take all the Bamot away.
That's
Right,
that's
do all that. No, not a punishment.
That's what the
He
Torah
gave a
said.
gift.
No, I don't think. I don't think
Is
it was a
it
question of
giving-
punishment. I don't think it was. I'll tell you what it is.
It was not
I don't think it was a question of punishment. The idea is, when you're talking a gift, on what grounds are you saying it's a gift? It's a gift as a matana, but it's a job. It's a responsibility. It's like, if Hashem benches you with a child, it's not that you can just relax. You now got to raise that child. You've got to do a lot of work. You've got to put in work. So the same thing, Hashem gives you a land. It's a type of gift, but he's giving you work to do. You've got to put it right. And the whole world was based on it.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
so take it one step further.
It's not a
He's
gift
got-
that you can
he's got-
sunbathe.
and all of us should be blessed with
Yeah.
like, healthy kids.
Mm.
But imagine Hashem gives you a kid that's hugely challenging.
He does
because-
that.
Because
Sadly and
he
tragically,
he
he does that.
He does it, but on the whole, he doesn't do that.
No,
On the
he
whole-
does it quite a lot.
On the whole, he gives you kids that like, if you raise them right,
But you still have to put in a lot of effort to raise them right. But even the ones,
kids gives you, he's like got leukemia. Not only he's got leukemia, but he's got warts all over his face, and like he's walked with a limp, and you got to like.
I think every single one is work.
And he needs to have dentistry. I mean, come on, he gives you a kid.
But the dentists are happy with that.
Why Egypt is Israel to go for 400 years in the loop until
Yes.
they become the.
Does it make sense?
It makes sense because
It
I'm
doesn't
telling
make
you,
sense.
that is you have to
400
earn-
years.
you earn-
430 years. Guns.
I think
Hashem
that's,
gave Adam Arishon everything for free. He messed it up. So now you have to earn it.
Hmm.
Hashem knew that was the level at the end.
Huh?
was that the pech I lechem.
Who
Yeah.
missed it?
His wife.
No, it wasn't him. How dare you blame him? It was his wife.
But he listened. But he listened.
Hey?
You should
He was in charge.
No, but seriously, that you have to earn it. And only when you earn it, you can actually enjoy the benefit of it.
But the truth is that if you know,
Mm.
if you got two kids here, one kid, you put two sweets out there. You know this kid's gonna have the sweet, and this kid might say, I might not have it. But if you know that kid's gonna have the sweet, why give him the sweet? Why make the obstacles so tough?
That's what life's about.
No,
Unfortunately, I mean, Hashem is testing all the time. The world's not simple. The world's not simple. The gift of Eretz Yisrael is worth work.
Hashem
I mean, even right now, look what's happening that one has to deal
When
with.
Chaim Shmuel Ebbets said,
Yeah.
if we don't learn Torah, if every Jew was focused on Torah, would have peaceful borders. That's what he said. We'd have peaceful borders. If
Peaceful
every
borders.
Yid was involved in Torah, our borders would be completely peaceful. We wouldn't have one.
But then why does that
Invasion.
Get it like that, want to do it.
Huh?
And create everyone who wants to learn Torah. Why give them such a terrible Yetzer Hara that they can't overcome it?
Well, that's
They
the
have
way it
no
is.
patience.
It's a test.
Straightforward and easy.
It's a test.
Right. Why do that? Make it that it's reasonable. Make it reasonable. What read Tehillim. How many times does David say in his Tehillim? It's like really enough. You know what I mean? You've tested me. I've tried to pass the test, but they're laughing at me and they're making me into like a nothing. I mean, give me a break. He says, give me a break. Give me a break. Let me do it.
Ask for
din. He didn't ask for rachamim. And
He did.
He
Of
asked for
course he asked for rachamim.
No, he asked for din.
After
He
Tehillim about
specifically-
rachamim. Come
he
on,
specifically
Martin. When
asked-
else did you do Tehillim?
I'll show you
He
Shmuel
said
B'Tefa,
Tehillim
it says
about
here.
rachamim.
No, but
talking-
history of David Melech.
He wrote Tehillim.
Reb Sholem.
Yeah.
When David Melech asked for din, there was a thing where he asked for din. He could have got rachamim, he got asked for din. So he said, test me with din. And then Hashem, and he couldn't. He had a wife, and he couldn't be with her because he was cold and stuff. So he had his tests as well. You forget one important thing: life is not a picnic.
Exactly, I just said that
Life
tonight
is
when I
a
arrived.
picnic. You'll be in Gan Eden.
Hashem tests us every day.
Things are not straightforward.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Why
He doesn't want to
one
make it
has
easy
to-
for us, but he doesn't want to make it impossible for
His
himself.
capacity. Need to
Because
understand what
he
he's
thinks we
supposed
can
to
handle.
do. And here we
That's
go.
what we call it.
No, the thing is, that people give
Can you
stuff
say Kaddish?
Sorry? I say.
You said Kaddish.
Jewish way.
You're going to mean it.
Well,
Right.
we-
Let it begin.
Wow,
that's exactly-
Jewish place.
Okay.
Are we doing Bacher'Gemora?
Okay, let's do it.
Same.
Let's do it.
Let's make Bacher'Gemora. Start. Finish your thing.
But also you